Is there anything else? Because look, when I think of a consumption from a first principle point of view, sure, I consume fruits, food, whatever, etc., because there is necessity, and there is necessity for shelter, and then there is necessity for safety. Those are primarily, they help me to live and survive and reproduce. And then there is status, and then there is beauty. Is there something else that comes to your mind that generally people lean
Yeah.
into for consumption?
Yeah, beautiful question. So what I do originally in the evolutionary basis of consumption is I argue that much of our purpose of behavior in general and in consumer behavior in particular could be broken down using the following four categories within the taxonomy. So number one is survival. Number two, and I'll give you examples of each in consumer behavior. Number two is reproduction. Number three is kin selection. And number four is reciprocal altruism. Those are sort of four foundational Darwinian modules that explain, pretty much everything. So unlike, say, Maslow's hierarchy, which, by the way, I released yesterday a clip on my show where I was talking about a recent biography I read on Maslow. Maslow is fantastic, but his hierarchy of needs was not couched within an evolutionary framework. It was more because he was a humanist psychologist. He was arguing that yes, we could be stuck on physiological needs at the base level, but really to truly be fulfilled, you have to aspire to the fifth level, self-actualization, which is perfectly fine. It's true, but it is not rooted in the evolutionary framework. So what I decided to do is say, okay, well, coming as an evolutionary psychologist, I would like to root all of our consumatory phenomena within an evolutionary based framework. So survival, let's give an example of survival. You and I and every single person in India and any person who's ever existed on earth have evolved gustatory preferences, taste buds, that originate from the fact that we come from an evolutionary environment where caloric scarcity and caloric uncertainty would have been endemic, right? The main challenge facing any species, including the human one, is first avoid becoming someone's dinner, get dinner, and then reproduce. That's it. Good night, everybody, right? So survival, one way by which it manifests itself is in food consumption. So because you and I have evolved the gustatory preferences to prefer fatty foods, then I can pretty reliably predict that you and I probably prefer some fatty food over raw celery. Now, the individual differences between us might be that I prefer a fatty steak, you prefer a chocolate mousse, but we both prefer some instantiation of fat over celeries, raw celeries. Okay, so many food consumption phenomena would fit under the survival module. Let's do reproduction. Well, we've already alluded to that. For example, the fact that women engage in sexual signaling in the mating market using specific products while men use other products to do so. For example, 99% of Ferrari owners happen to be, drumroll, men. And it doesn't change across cultures. It doesn't change across time periods, notwithstanding the fact that there are innumerable women who are millionaires and billionaires who could certainly afford the Ferrari, yet they don't line up at the car dealership. Why? Because men couldn't give a damn. I could take a very unattractive woman who owns a Ferrari versus a gorgeous drop-dead woman who takes the bus. Guess what 99.9% of men would prefer to mate with, right? Now, again, that doesn't mean it's the only metric. It's most men don't only choose based on beauty, but it certainly is a driver of my mate choice and yours. Okay, so that would be survival and reproduction. Now, let's come to the next two, kin selection and reciprocity. Now, it turns out, we see this in many species, including humans, that organisms are willing to go to great lengths to even to sacrifice their lives for their kin, right? So why would I jump into a river to save my 3 children at the risk of me potentially dying? If Darwinian selection operated at the organism level, you should never see that behavior, right? Because I only care about my survival. It makes absolutely no evolutionary sense for why I would engage in kin altruism to jump and save my kids. But JBS Haldane, who, by the way, spent some time in India, Haldane, Haldane, was a evolutionary geneticist. He basically solved that conundrum, which has then been explained further by guys like Bill Hamilton, who unfortunately passed away from a malaria infection. If you understand that evolution operates at the gene level, and if you understand that each of my children on average shares half of my genes with me, therefore, if I jump into the river and save this packet of genes called 3 children, well, it makes perfect evolutionary sense for that behavior to have evolved, right? And you see it in many, many species where it's as if literally that calculus is built into the organism's brain. Okay, so that it's engaging in a cost-benefit analysis as to whether to risk its life to save the packet of genes that are in the burrow, okay, or whatever, or in the river. Now, how would that manifest itself in consumer behavior? Well, gift-giving patterns follow exactly that calculus to a T. Okay, so with one of my, by the way, I'm only dropping this because I'm speaking on an Indian show. My greatest doctoral student of all time is a gentleman by the name of Tripat Gill, who is a very close friend now, and a gem of a human being. Well, with him, we published a paper way back in 2003 where we looked at the manner by which people allocate their gift-giving budgets as a function of the genetic relatedness between them and the recipient. And guess what? It is perfectly calibrated, meaning, let's put it in easier terms, most people are much more likely to give a larger gift to their sibling than to their second cousin, right? And I mean, the data is just, it's just perfect. It's gorgeous, okay? So that would be, so now I've given examples of consumer phenomena in survival, in reproduction, in kin. Let's do the 4th one. Well, okay, we understand why I jump into the river to save my 3 children. Why do I jump into the river to save you? You're not biologically related to me. You could be a friend, or even more paradoxical. Why would I ever jump into a river to save you if you're a total stranger, right? There are evolutionary explanations that might explain why you and I, if we're close friends, we might engage in these behaviors. But why a total stranger? This is where the brilliance of Robert Trivers comes in, who is one of the greatest evolutionary biologists since Darwin, which is saying a lot. Well, he is the gentleman who proposed the evolutionary explanation for why reciprocal altruism evolves within human species. And then I'll link it to consumer behavior in a second. But let's look at our primate cousins. Our primate cousins engage in a behavior called reciprocal grooming. What is reciprocal grooming? Well, I'm now some primate other than human. The humans are called hairless primates, but we have a lot of primates who have a lot of hair. When you have a lot of hair, there are all sorts of ticks and parasites that come into your hair. I can't reach in my back to take out those annoying things. How about I show you my back and you spend the next half an hour taking away those ticks, with the understanding that once we do it one way, I will reciprocate, right? So this reciprocal grooming builds bonds, forges alliances. There's even related to hierarchy in terms of who grooms whom first. And so the mechanism of reciprocity is built into social species. Now, why do humans do it? There are several reasons, but let's go back to our ancestral environment. When you and I are walking around in the African savannah, or our ancestors, remember earlier I said we face caloric uncertainty and caloric scarcity, which means that I might die of hunger and my family might die of hunger. If we bring down this 3,000-pound game, there is no refrigeration. It's difficult to save all of it. How about we engage in the following insurance policy? I will share my spoils with your family that is not biologically related to me. on the understanding that in the future you will reciprocate in kind. By us engaging in this reciprocal arrangement, we end up increasing our chances of survival. Now, by the way, there's fantastic studies which I discuss in several of my books that shows how this understanding of reciprocity has shaped our mind. Example, if I show you a bunch of photos of people, okay, you ready to get your mind blown? I show you a bunch of photos of people and I ask you to memorize their faces. And the only thing I add to the face is whether this person is a social cheater, meaning that this person would violate norms of reciprocity or not. But otherwise, I keep how physically attractive they are controlled. Like I do the proper experimental design. Guess what happens to people's memories? They're much more likely to remember the faces of social cheaters, showing to you that our memory system has evolved to solve specific evolutionary problems. And therefore, the reason why I remember whether you're a social cheater or not, and hence your face, is because that has a clear survival benefit to me in remembering that. Because if I know that when I give you a gift, I can be assured that you're going to be a parasite and never reciprocate, this is valuable information for me to have from an evolutionary perspective. Don't trust this asshole. And so therefore, I could then demonstrate that this reciprocity Darwinian mechanism manifests itself in many consumatory contexts, including in the alignment of our friendship. If I invite you 3 times, 3 years in a row for your birthday, and you fail each of those 3 times, believe me, I'm going to remember that.